Hey, what's happening everybody? This is Rob of Ro2R Review. Welcome back to the channel. And today I wanted to discuss the future of Nintendo's home consoles for the long term. So I do have to say before I get started on this topic that it is finally a decent temperature here in the Pacific Northwest. It's like 60 degrees outside, the sun is shining, it's like a normal spring day almost, which also means no hoodie. The hoodie is finally gone. I feel warm enough and comfortable enough to just wear a t-shirt. And man, after all this time, it feels pretty darn good. But of course, we're not here to talk about the weather. We're talking about Nintendo and the Switch and their overall business model and the potential future. So obviously, as the title of this video suggests, I'm considering what Nintendo has been doing this last 2 years with the Nintendo Switch, which was a huge thing for them to do, a huge change from all of their previous business models. And then what they might want to be doing in the future, whether it's the console that first succeeds the Switch, or whatever they do beyond that console. So this video topic is an idea that's been running around in my brain for many, many months, which is actually the case of, it's actually the case with most of the videos that I make that aren't some sort of like relevant news topic. If it's just some random idea or theory or conversation, it's usually something that I've been ruminating on for weeks or months at a time. And it's also funny because this is also very similar to a conversation I had way back when the Nintendo Switch was launching. Could have been right before the launch, it could have been right after, I can't really remember now. But at that time I discussed if Nintendo would be, after the Switch's life was done, if they would be going back to a regular home console. I think it's a really valid and interesting question. And what I remember is at the time that I had that discussion, again, the Switch was a brand new concept at the time. But what I remember was I very much thought that, yeah, once the Switch is done, more than likely Nintendo will probably go back to making just a regular old home console, just a normal box, a normal machine that sits under your TV and plugs into it and allows you to play games that you put in and put out with a normal controller, and then that's just going to be it. And they may or may not be doing another dedicated portable, but after the hybrid console that is the Switch, they'll just go back to doing the normal thing that they've always done. Now here we are, you know, basically 2 years later from the time that the Switch is launched, and in a lot of ways some things have changed for sure. I mean, if anything, we've seen how crazy successful the Switch is. I mean, I've said it so many times on videos, you guys, the console keeps selling, the software for the console keeps selling, which is a very important piece of information to the whole thing, to the whole picture, because a lot of times successful hardware doesn't necessarily mean that it's also moving software. But with the Switch, and honestly with most Nintendo consoles, that has been the case. So it's succeeding on all fronts there. Obviously, there are some missteps. 2018 was definitely a slow year for game output. Obviously, the online service isn't great and isn't lighting anyone's socks on fire, you know. I don't really mind it, but it's definitely not a perfect service, and it is something that a lot of people are very upset about. So yeah, Nintendo's making some missteps, but overall, in the Switch era, we're seeing them be crazy successful. Which brings me back to what I alluded to a few minutes ago. When Nintendo decided to just make the Switch what it was, that was a huge change and a huge shift from what they'd always been doing. With their previous machines, I mean, yeah, they're always kind of changing the controller or changing the interface between the player and the game and all that stuff with gamepads and Wii remotes and Virtual Boys and analog sticks and all that. But at the end of the day, they were still making, ultimately, traditional home consoles. And also a traditional dedicated portable machine. I mean, they've been doing that almost since they've been a company 30, 40 some odd years ago. I mean, once the first Game Boy came along, suddenly it's like, oh, Nintendo really kicks ass at the portable stuff, so clearly they're going to keep doing that. They have kept doing that, and they've been unstoppable in that space. But I think it's hard not to admire how successful they've been with the Switch. Once they decided to take these two concepts, these two ideas, or business models, I should say, within the company, and mash them together for the Switch and have something that is both home console and both handheld, it's amazing to see what they've done. And again, it's impossible not to admire that. And so now, we are 2 years later, like I said, from when the Switch launched, seeing how successful it is. When I think about what Nintendo might be doing after the Switch or long term, I'm not 100% dead set on the idea that Nintendo will again split the business model one more time and go back to a home console device and a handheld device. And I'm not 100% either way, to be fair, but I was mostly sure 2 years ago that they would do that, and now I'm borderline 50-50. There's a couple of reasons why I think it might make sense for Nintendo to want to continue to do the Switch idea. I mean, that's really the thesis of this video, I guess, is if Nintendo is now permanently a Switch console developer, like for all time, as in the successor to the Switch is going to do home console and portable stuff, and the successor to that, and the successor to that, and they'll be tweaking and upgrading and adding to the features and the power of these machines, obviously, and making some changes and evolving the idea. But maybe the core concept for Nintendo's hardware going forward for the foreseeable future is only to ever do what the Nintendo Switch is. And so, like I was saying, there are some reasons why to me that makes sense. One of the biggest ones, beyond the fact that they've just been so successful with the Switch and it dug them out of the hole that the poor Wii U dug them into, is the fact that the competitive space for the portable and mobile and handheld market of gaming is way more serious than it was even in 2011 when the 3DS came out. And I think that that's something that can't be understated. I mean, the Nintendo Switch aside, it's the 3DS that was their last true traditional, dedicated, portable-only gaming device. And again, we go back to 2011 when the 3DS came out. Cell phone gaming and just cell phones in general were nothing like what they are nowadays. I don't know. I mean, the iPhone would have been in its infancy. We weren't even still so used to always being connected to the internet on our phones. I mean, it existed, but it wasn't to the level and the degree it is now. Which also means that, yes, while gaming did exist on cell phones in 2011, it's probably quadrupled in size, if not even more, from then until now in 2018, and especially by the time the Switch might be done, which could be as early as, 2022 in my kind of guesstimation. And so you go another couple of years from now, we're moving on to the next machine. If Nintendo wanted to try to do a regular home console and a handheld again, the handheld space is crazy. It is so competitive, it is so dangerous in the mobile-filled market to try to compete the same way they did with the 3DS back in 2011. And obviously there was the PSP and the PlayStation Vita and stuff happening at that time as well. Sony definitely saw some great success with the PSP and some not so great success with the Vita, so we've seen them struggle in a market where they had mobile gaming and Nintendo gaming to compete against. Now, with mobile gaming having grown into this huge unstoppable monster in the last 8 years, I'm sure that even the mighty Nintendo sees it as dangerous territory. If they were to want to introduce something that isn't also their own smartphone and isn't also a Switch that, yes, is portable but also home console, I'm sure that they realize that there's a good chance that that device might fail in today's market. Also, I think it's worth noting that there is a good chance with the success of the Switch, and especially if it continues for the next 3 or so years until the next machine would come along, that after the Switch, it might be kind of hard for Nintendo to sell the average gamer and the average Nintendo fan on the idea of going back to just a regular console that plugs into your TV and only plays on your TV. And I know that that might sound strange, especially because Sony and Microsoft still do that, so we're still used to it. But when it comes to Nintendo and the Switch, in a weird way, Nintendo's almost groomed or trained a lot of gamers, I mean, even myself nowadays, to really appreciate the fact that at any time, we can take our huge, epic, AAA, massive console experience games on the go. We can just pick it right up off that dock, and it's in our hands, the exact same game and experience, and we can go anywhere on the planet with our games, and then continue them back on our TV. I mean, the very nature and design of the console, as you guys know. And, like, we're so used to that now. The idea of Nintendo specifically removing that and just going back to a regular machine might feel like a de-evolution. It might feel like a step backwards. And in a way that wouldn't really be fair to say, because traditional home console gaming still very much does exist and is great. But I think it's just a matter of the perception of it. Whether or not it's fair almost doesn't matter. What matters is, will people feel like it's a step backwards for Nintendo to do that? And I think that a lot of people would. I mean, I obviously would still be excited for a traditional home console from Nintendo. I kind of would like to see that again. But I would also be very sad to know, man, now every new Metroid and Zelda and Mario game and whatever that comes out on the next Nintendo machine, I'm not going to be able to play that wherever I want, lay in bed doing my thing. Like, I really enjoy taking advantage of that now, and losing it would make me very sad. It's easily and without question one of the main things in my head that honestly made me realize how I feel about Nintendo going forward, and made me realize I even wanted to have this conversation. You know, really, I think the switch in my brain happened when I thought about Nintendo's next machine, or the one after the next machine, being just another box under your TV and thinking, man, I actually would be really sad that I just couldn't take my games on the go the way I've been doing with the Switch for 2 years now. And again, as I already said, another couple of years from now, we'll only be that much more embedded in the idea, because now we only have 2 years of the Switch, but what happens once we've had 5 years of the Switch, and then we have to go to the next machine? I mean, these are the reasons why. I bet Nintendo has probably thought of all of this stuff, and you'd have to think that right now, in 2019, they've got a small collection of people already hammering away at the next thing, the next big thing from Nintendo, whatever device or hardware or gaming machine they're going to make after the Switch, for when the Switch eventually is dead and gone, like all consoles do. And they might be thinking, hey, we need to make another machine that's just like the Switch. And I'm not talking about like a Switch Pro. We all know that the idea of a Switch Pro or a new Nintendo Switch exists. There are rumors. It might be a real thing. But I'm not talking about an upgraded Switch. I'm talking about a Switch Part 2, the actual sequel, the successor. Something that's 2 or 3 times as powerful, that could compete with the PlayStation 5, for example. They might really be thinking, hey, we can't make another machine. Make sure that this thing has its own screen. Make sure it can be played portable, but also plug into a TV. Make sure it needs a dock or it doesn't need a dock, but whatever it does, it's got to operate like the Switch. Do that. That really could be what that team of people is doing. However, to bring this back around and end the conversation still kind of on the other side of the fence just to explore that, I do still want to ultimately state that there is a nostalgic part of me that still loves the simple concept of what gaming consoles have always been. Just something that plugs into your TV and doesn't do the hybrid thing. And that includes all of Nintendo's consoles, because I've loved all of their consoles. Even the Wii U that everyone hates, I love the damn Wii U. You guys know that. And so, yeah, like, as much as I'm thinking maybe I would prefer the Switch concept to continue forever, provided Nintendo just improves on it every time, I mean, there is a part of me that does kind of like the old school nature of just a machine, and would be excited or curious to see what Nintendo would do with just another regular box that doesn't do the fancy Switch thing. That would be cool. That would be interesting. I want to see. So I don't want to pretend like if Nintendo did that, or if Sony and Microsoft just continued to do that, like suddenly, because the Switch is so great, that it's changed my perception of regular home consoles forever. Because that's not really what this conversation is about, and it's not really what I'm saying. I still love the traditional thing. I'm old, man. I've been playing games forever, so I've had like 40 consoles or whatever that have all been the regular thing. The Switch is the first one in 30 or 40 years to do what it does. So we're obviously used to regular consoles, and I'm not ready to just write them off forever from Nintendo or anyone else just because the Switch is great. But I did think the conversation warranted having, because it seemed like a fun idea, and it's an interesting idea. It's a fun mystery, you know. I'm not trying to shove the Switch out the door and move on to the next thing yet. You know, I really am fine with the Switch for another 2 or 3 years. But you know, at the end of the day, we know the next thing is always coming from someone. We know Sony and Microsoft are working on machines, and you've heard me say I believe Nintendo needs some kind of answer for them relatively soon. If PS5 and Xbox Scarlet come out next year, I think by the year after, Nintendo needs to at least announce the successor to the Switch, if not launch it. And yeah, we're talking 2021 at that point, which might seem really soon for you guys, but I don't think that the PS5 and Scarlet generation can coexist alongside this 2017 Nintendo Switch machine for very long. And I'm sure Nintendo knows it. And so that's what got me thinking about the future. That's what got me thinking about Nintendo doing the hybrid thing. And then do they need to keep doing the hybrid thing, or do they want to split it back apart? Would they only do home consoles and just abandon dedicated handhelds outright? Do Switch thing forever? I mean, who knows? It's 100 options. Obviously, I'm just exploring these options and putting the idea out there for you guys to think about, you to hear my conversation, and then you to have your own conversations. Whether it's with me or with your friends or with yourself, whatever, let's just start thinking about this stuff because it's kind of fun. But again, I'm not saying goodbye to the Switch. I love the Switch. I don't need it to go away in the next 4 months for the next big thing. That's not what I'm getting at. So, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. As per usual, I love that Nintendo is this great mystery. They always keep us guessing. They're very hard to predict. They are so fun to discuss. It's why I talk about them in 90% of my videos. It's why they're my favorite company. And so in the next, I don't know, I'm guessing 2 years, we're probably going to have some kind of insight or inclination into what Nintendo's doing. And if it's another Switch-like device, that'll be very interesting. If it's not, and it's something else, that's also going to be pretty interesting. I think, at least. So Discuss the idea below. What do you expect Nintendo to do going forward? What do you want them to do? Do those two ideas align in your brain, or are they separate things? Whatever you feel, talk about it. Just a fun Nintendo conversation just to kind of do it. And that is going to be it for me today. So thanks, of course, as always, for tuning in, guys. This is Rob of Ro2R, and I'll catch you next time on another video.